Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Gregg, and welcome to another episode of Tetzeli Talks. With me, of course, given the name of the show is Helena Tetzeli, a partner a partner at the firm Kurzban, Tetzeli, and Pratt, with over 25 years of experience in the immigration realm. Every month, or we try to at least, we navigate the most up-to-date issues on your mind in the immigration sphere, and the fact that we're talking today on January 21st, 2025, the day after the new president's inauguration. There's going to be a lot on your mind and on our minds. So we wanted to hop on and talk about a bunch of things that are going on. What's up, Helena?
Executive order apocalypse. That's what's going on, Kevin.
Executive Order Apocalypse. Now,
I've
you and I
printed
have
them
been,
out. I've started to read them, working on some summaries for some, people that want summaries
yeah.
and just starting to absorb some of the not unexpected. I have to say, I don't think I was really surprised by anything. Were you?
No, well,
Oh.
I take it back. I did not think that he was going to end birthright citizen attempt to end
Mm,
birthright citizenship for some people through an executive order. That seems like a crazy thing to do, even for him, but here we are. And before we get into it, I mean, you and I went through the first Trump administration. I guess before we get into the specifics of what happened yesterday, just what are your general feelings as compared to Trump 1? I mean, the first time he started with the Muslim bans. That was pretty chaotic too. I mean, what are your
Now we have a pre-Muslim ban. They're actually going to, he's ordered them to um, do some vetting, set up a task force to determine which countries are actually doing the necessary vetting and not doing the necessary vetting. So I think this is a precursor. They're laying the foundation for what will probably be another Muslim ban, probably
Mhm.
broader, probably won't just be a Muslim ban, but may apply to citizens from other countries that the administration doesn't like.
Yeah.
So that's my first thought. They didn't do it right off the bat, right out of the gate. Um, you know, Good for them. They may be a little smarter this time about how the world works. Some of the other, speaking to someone who should know, whose name I can't divulge, but told me that his take on the birthright citizenship, was that it was slightly sloppily put together, in this person's opinion, because those who know the law and the administration probably understand it will not withstand scrutiny, but they sent it out anyways to satisfy the base and or their boss. Um,
I'm surprised that
we'll see.
you've got such a good connection to Stephen Miller that he would divulge thoughts to you
Six
about the
degrees,
executive.
Kevin, 6 degrees.
No,
Six degrees.
I
Yeah,
understand you have him
yeah.
on speed dial, that he's a personal
Yeah,
friend,
no, we're not on a first name
that
basis.
you're
We're
Steve,
not on a first
call
name
him
basis.
Steve Mill.
No, no, I'm not gonna.
No, you don't. Okay, it's
No,
not
no,
Steve. Your
no,
source is not Stephen Miller. Understood.
no. No, my source is not Stephen Miller, but it is
Forget about,
someone
I mean,
who
forget about
should
the
know.
substance of the executive
Mhm.
order. I mean, let's kick this around because people are terrified, understandably. As written, it would essentially make people no longer citizens and certainly not citizens going forward, provided the father wasn't a citizen, and then provided
Or,
the
or
mother
LPR, very
or
magnanimous.
LPR,
Right.
which makes no sense,
Mhm.
and assuming then the mother was here without authorization
Well,
or
wait, no, it's worse than that.
well, I know, I mean,
Right.
without authorization or even
Or
with
lawfully
authorization,
here, but temporarily.
right?
So as a visitor or
H-1Bs,
working here,
B2s,
working
working
here
here,
on an L1 visa or an H1B visa or an E visa. Yeah,
students
sure.
who,
Yeah.
so. There's the 14th Amendment, right, which would seem to indicate that all
Hmm.
people born in America, but for a very limited exception, are U.S. citizens in birth. The only exception I'm aware of is the children of diplomats, and that's because those diplomats, and this we're talking high-level diplomats, people who really have this blanket immunity from having to interact with the U.S. justice system. U.S. has no jurisdiction over these people, people who are like little countries in America. So their children are exempt because the U.S. doesn't have legal authority over them. But that is, of course, not the case with any of the people in the executive order. For example, if a person here without authorization were to rob somebody, that person would be prosecuted in America, correct?
Correct.
So
I don't get it either. I don't get the with jurisdiction as
Hmm.
that's the argument. I don't get
The
it.
argument is that somehow these
They're not within the
people,
jurisdiction of the United States, the legal jurisdiction. But you're right, Kevin, as you just explained very cogently, they are, of course.
I mean,
Unless we're
even
going to
even
stop prosecuting them and sending them back to their country of origin to be
right,
prosecuted for some
even the
offense they
most
committed on American soil. Hmm?
even the most non-citizen adverse jurisdictional holdings of late, the Thurasagam decision from a few years ago, recognizes that there is authority, but maybe it's lessened when they're just like at the border or like just barely got in.
Right.
But
Exactly.
even Thurasagam,
But
assume
even then, exactly. Yeah.
I'm no expert, it does seem, and I think it's just telling about where we are today on January 21st, 2025. And I'm not a scholar on it, it seems that the only plausible basis for this line of precedent, I think it comes and surrounds Dred Scott, where literally at 19th century slavery jurisprudence as potential
No.
support for such an
I mean,
argument.
there's a Supreme Court case law. It's really old.
Right.
It's on Kimar from 1898, but
Right. It's okay.
after Dred
1898.
Scott, after Dred
Right, but
Scott.
I think it starts with Dred Scott, right? It's principles of
Sure,
Dred
that's the
Scott that we can
reason for the
have,
14th Amendment. Right,
right? That we
right.
can have levels of people in America, that some people are lesser. I can't believe that's where we are.
Seeing is believing. I mean, seeing that first EO last night was
Hmm.
was still kind of like a just a cold bucket of water, even
Yeah.
though, I don't think many of us were shocked. I mean, certainly had been warned.
Well, for anyone listening who's terrified, and rightfully so, these are scary times to be in this country, quite frankly, lawfully or unlawfully, without being a citizen. You can't get rid of citizenship through an executive order. He has
Kevin, how
directed
many
his
lawsuits do we
people.
have so far? The ACLU, a nonprofit organization, I forget the name.
Correct.
I think 18 states.
Correct. There's 17 or
So,
18 states.
yeah, so
So,
we're going to
for all
see some action real soon on this.
and
Yeah.
maybe when this posts, I'm sure there'll be even more updates. But this, I guess they knew lawsuits would come. They've decided to make this their first battle. Strategically, honestly, it seems like a decent move. Maybe they get a loss on this, and then everything else is softened up. I don't know how they think. I'd be if if the Trump administration succeeds on this, then I don't know why I went to law school. It does not seem like this is not how law works as I learned law. I don't know. That's all I could, I mean, it's just completely out of left
I don't know
field.
what to say, I want to be positive and, hold out hope. I and hope that this is not going to be sustained. But yeah, you never know. I mean, the climate has changed so much. The
Right.
political climate has changed so much since 2016 in the courts that
Yeah.
you don't know. We don't know. So
Well, that is a very negative way of me being positive. I don't want to be
you
bullish
were
because
being positive.
yes,
How
I
was
don't
you
want to
being
be
positive?
bullish. I don't want to be, but I'd just be astonished if the ultimate resolution, even with the Supreme Court that is not always so friendly to non-citizens, and that does seem pretty friendly to Donald Trump, I'll be astonished if the Supreme Court blesses this in 2020, well, 5 or 2026. I'm willing to believe a lot of things. I'm not yet willing to believe that they ultimately win on this.
I hope you're right, Kevin.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
hopefully this
guardedly
goes well.
optimistic. Okay, but that's as
That's right.
far as I'll go.
Helena, what else is on your mind?
Well, the Lake and Riley Act, Kevin, which apparently just passed both houses of Congress. And I
Yeah.
guess we're just waiting for a signature from the president.
And what will this act do?
A lot. I mean, I think it's 4 pages long, but it does a lot, Kevin. So, first and foremost, it essentially amends some provisions of the INA, in particular INA Section 236, which, as you know, as a immigration specialists, governs detention of aliens, including
Mandatory.
mandatory detention of aliens, and basically expands the provision on mandatory detention to include, in addition to aliens who have actually committed offenses or presumably convicted, aliens who are charged, so not necessarily convicted, charged with theft, including petty theft,
Yeah.
larceny, to mandatory detention. So that is one thing that it does. And then in addition, it gives, I guess, standing, although I'm sure there'll be litigation on that issue, to the attorney general of every state to sue the federal government and obtain injunctive relief against DHS, Department of State, on, for example, on issuing visas from to aliens from a particular country if the state has been if the state or a resident of the state has been damaged in the amount of at least $100. So what that means is that any attorney general of any state, presumably if a crime is committed by a foreign national in the state who wasn't detained, suppose, can then sue the federal government and shut down issuance of visas to people from a particular country. So
That
it's certainly
seems
gonna,
crazy.
huh?
That seems crazy.
It does seem crazy. Yeah, I think that's gonna have certainly some um cramping the style of future administrations when it comes to making immigration policy, to put it mildly. Uh, in addition to the due process concerns and issues which are likely to make it, um, subject
Yeah.
to challenge regarding the mandatory detention of individuals who have not been convicted of a crime.
Sorry, I
And
do have a bit of a
and it's
cold.
duplicative. I mean, the attorney general already has the authority to detain indefinitely, or well, not indefinitely necessarily, but pending removal, a foreign national charged with a
The-
crime.
yeah, the whole concept of mandatory detention, quite frankly, is not something I've ever understood, unless, of course, you assume that the private prisons want to make a lot of money, and their stock
Mm,
did go up 400% when
you're
Trump
so
was
cynical.
voted in. I've never quite understood mandatory detention because, nobody has ever challenged even the most progressive of immigration attorneys have never said that non-citizens shouldn't be detained, but detaining
Correct.
them without even giving them the opportunity to prove to an immigration judge that they're not a danger
Mm-hmm.
or a flight risk is something that has never made sense to me. I mean, an arrest is not a conviction. A conviction can occur for many reasons. We as a country have never detained people, even not citizens who murder someone, uh, get an
Well, they've been
opportunity.
detained, but they have the right
They,
to
they have an
a
opportunity,
hearing,
right? They have
to
an
present
opportunity
a
to
case
prove.
while they're not a risk of flight or a danger.
They have
Yeah,
an opportunity to prove to a neutral
right.
judge that they might be deserving of release. Now, those people usually aren't, but to take away the opportunity for simply being arrested. And by the, I think it was, there's been so many bills and amendments. I think it was also included to violent offenses and assaulting a police officer, which is a pretty amorphous charge in many states. It's just not something that we do in any other context in
And
America.
let's talk about who it covers. This is my take on it is that it covers individuals who are here, who entered without a visa. So someone who entered without inspection. Um, but it also covers individuals who might be here under some sort of protected status, like DACA or
Hmm.
TPS, if their original admission was without a visa or inspection and parole. So that's going to sweep pretty widely. Uh,
Correct. And I don't want to be negative, but I've written about this. I mean, let's take it one step farther. If, as expected, DACA and temporary protected status are eventually taken away, you are
mhm.
eligible for both of those forms of pseudo relief if you have, quite frankly, any arrests. And so even if you have a conviction, it usually requires two misdemeanors or a felony to be deemed ineligible. So if you were to take away the pseudo protection of, I don't know, 5 million people for DACA and TPS, there's a good chance that a fair amount of them came here as children without authorization, and that maybe they have an arrest or even a conviction for some sort of nonviolent or even low-level assault misdemeanor, an arrest or conviction, that all of a sudden not only do they are they subject to removal proceedings, but mandatory detention as well, despite living in this country, in the case of the DACA people, possibly for over 3 decades and having amazing equities. Is that about right?
That's about right. Sums it up. Yeah, that's where we are right now.
And so it is surprising that the Democrats would not have tried to get protections for some of these people in the negotiations. It's been a bit of a frustrating couple of weeks, just for flat out politics, for pro-immigration, or
Well,
just pro-humanitarian.
now you're
Act.
getting into this. Sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
No, I mean, my take on it is you have this now, Democrats are think that appeasing this section of the electorate is somehow going to protect them
Hmm.
or improve the party's standing, which it's not. So it's really that's really discouraging to see.
It
Since
is, but even pure politics,
appeasing a tyrant doesn't normally work, as we all know from history.
right? But again, even plain politics aside, it doesn't. Many of these senators and congresspeople have constituents who care about the issues of DACA, um, for example, that I would have thought would have expected if you were going to give such sweeping powers to the anti-immigration forces, you would have tried to have gotten out at least some bargain.
Back that out, correct? Yeah.
That has been the governing thing for many
Mhm.
years, is that we will resolve these sympathetic humanitarian issues when there is negotiations. But lo and behold, here have the negotiations begun, and nothing was even requested on those issues, is my understanding. So it's been a frustrating couple of weeks for me.
Yeah, culminating in last night and today, looking at these executive orders, which is, combined with what is this act, which is this bill act, which is soon to become law, is extremely discouraging if you're an immigration advocate, much less an immigrant.
I
But
I think it's important to note, and I know this will be edited, and I hope we keep this in. I mean, what happened to Miss Riley was horrible, horrible thing. I'm not a policy person, but I'm pretty sure that the fact that the individual who did this terrible thing to Lincoln Riley, the fact that he had a prior theft arrest, I think it's probably pretty coincidental to whether or not that means he's then going to do this heinous thing. The two things don't necessarily seem to jive, and we have unfortunately, many terrible things happen to people in this country committed by people who have no prior arrest history. So,
or who were born here.
or who were born here. So if you're,
It was
I'm not sure. It just doesn't make sense to me. A horrible thing happened. A horrible bill was passed, and they only seem tangentially related to address the issue of this terrible thing. I want to be clear, this terrible thing that happened to Miss Riley, and it breaks our heart. It breaks my heart, her family. But I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. It's just,
I agree with you, but it's just another example of a, a right-wing populist movement demonizing immigrants and using that as a way to pander to their base and gin up energy um, to gain votes. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. Um, there's no need for this law, as we said. In, an individual who's unlawfully here, unless they have DACA or TPS or some other protection, is subject to detention, whether or not they commit a crime. They're subject to being placed in removal proceedings
yeah.
and can be detained. And you're removing any kind of discretion or flexibility from the agency doing the detaining when you do this. I mean, you're not really helping them either. These facilities are overcrowded as it is. But again, Kevin, you're right. This will help the private, um, you know, prison industry. It's more work for them, more contracts for them, and I'm sure that's going to be another impact of many of these, not just the Lake and Raleigh Act, but of course the protecting America against invasion, protecting
Hmm.
the states against invasion. These executive orders that
Invasion. I
invasion,
didn't. I wasn't aware of the invasion. I've had my. I live in a border city. I wasn't aware
an
of the
invasion.
invasion
Didn't know.
occurring. It hasn't been clear to me. I started my career working for the immigration judges. It's quite telling too about what it says about what Congress thinks about their own immigration judges. that they are not capable of accurately discerning who is a danger and who is a flight risk, that they would take away the ability of immigration judges to look at a person, core to what being a judge is, that they would take away even that ability to judge someone's character. It's quite telling what is thought of the immigration judges, and it's not warranted based on my experience with immigration judges. They are very good judges of character. If anything, with a bias towards detention. Now, I mean, you can't label 800 judges with a broad brush, but
I'm sure
um,
they're viewed as just another part of the deep state, Kevin.
the deep state.
Yeah, so well, they're civil servants.
As a prior member, we never had a meeting. Although I was only for 2 years, so I was temporary, so maybe I never got the invite because they knew that my term was
That
up
was it.
by
Yeah.
statute after 2 years
Mhm.
or by regulation. Well, Helena, that was pretty negative, and with my own podcast, I'm going to be making a pledge not to just be a indirect propaganda piece for the anti-immigrant forces for the coming 4 years, but we do want to talk about these important things that are happening. So, how can we end on a good note? I mean, what are we and other good attorneys and organizations going to do with what is being thrown at us? How does this what do we do now? What do people
You just brought me back to a dark place, Kevin. For some reason, my mind went to something I read this morning. I was on the website for, I think it was the Center for Immigration Studies, and which is not friendly to
Mhm.
immigrants.
Immigration studies.
And there was an article on what they're calling injustice porn.
Mm.
Basically, newspaper articles, um, news about the side effects, the humanitarian impacts on families, communities caused by, say, mass deportation and removal, and belittling it and calling it injustice porn. So I'm sorry, still in a dark place. I had no idea that
Well,
existed.
it's very
Yeah.
telling though because I'm not even going to go there. Um, but how do we end on a good note then? What
How do
will
we
we
end on
be
a good
doing?
note? Well, litigation is a growth industry again. Immigration litigation will be even more of a growth industry than it already is. And I'm including removal defense.
But we got to be clear that they're taking away some of our abilities. But
I
it's
understand.
our job to get as creative as possible.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
statute is still the statute. The regulations.
The Constitution is still the Constitution.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you know what? If it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be intellectually challenging.
And we wouldn't be doing what we do
That's
because
right.
we don't like being bored. So
That's right.
we are not going to be bored. Let's look at it that way.
Let's look at it that way.
Already
We'll
quite
get through this
stimulating.
together.
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
be
We'll get through this together, just like we did for the pandemic.
I look forward to talking to you again in 4 years on the other side and see how this interview and this discussion played out.
Bye, Kevin. Take
Bye.
care. Feel better.